What's in the bag?
A charger. A drink. Gum.
You pay for it?
Yes, sir.
Receipt.
It's in my pocket.
Hey, don't reach.
You asked for it.
Hands where I can see them.
Okay, I paid for it. I was just trying to show you.
Why were you hanging around electronics?
I was picking the charger.
Why are you nervous?
Can I call my dad?
Officer Ryan Haskell believed he controlled that parking lot. Then he detained a 13-year-old boy for a theft that never happened, ignored the receipt that would have ended the stop, and kept pushing after the facts were already against him. He did not know the boy was Evan Mercer, the son of Daniel Mercer, the incoming Metropolitan Police Chief. That mistake did not stay a routine field stop. It became the kind of case that can end a career. Tell me where you're watching from: city, state, or country. And if you like stories about abuse of authority getting exposed through facts, recordings, and accountability, like the video and subscribe. This started in a retail plaza in a large American city. There was a pharmacy, a coffee shop, a nail salon, and a dry cleaner. It was busy enough for witnesses and covered well enough with cameras that nobody should have felt safe cutting corners. Officers still did it there. Places like that made some of them careless because they assumed the scene would look calm from a distance. Evan Mercer was 13 years old. He was quiet, careful, and used to paying attention. He had been raised by a father who understood exactly how street encounters could turn bad. Daniel Mercer had not become Metropolitan Police Chief yet, but the appointment was public, and the transition had already started. He had told his son the basic rules more than once. Keep your hands visible. Speak clearly. Do not argue in public with an officer. Do not make sudden movements. Let facts do the work. On that afternoon, Evan stopped at the pharmacy after school. He needed a phone charger. He also bought a drink and gum. He used self-checkout, paid, took the printed receipt, and put it in his pocket. There was nothing complicated about it. The problem started because a newer employee noticed him standing near the electronics rack for a little longer than most customers did. The employee mentioned it to the store manager, Priya Shah. She did what a competent manager was supposed to do. She checked the area and looked into the transaction record. She had not confirmed a theft. She had not identified missing merchandise. She was still checking when the call that reached police got simplified into something much looser and much more dangerous. A suspicious juvenile was possibly shoplifting. That kind of call leaves room for a bad officer to build his own story. Officer Ryan Haskell took the call. He had a reputation for aggressive retail stops and a habit of treating pressure like investigation. He liked fast compliance. He liked being the loudest person in a scene. He called himself proactive. Supervisors use more careful language because departments do that when they are not ready to admit the real issue. The real issue was simple. He often decided what happened before he had enough facts to say it. By the time Haskell arrived, Evan had already left the store and was crossing the lot with a pharmacy bag in one hand and a backpack over one shoulder. Haskell got out of the patrol car and stopped him before he reached the sidewalk. He asked what was in the bag. Evan answered him. He asked whether he had paid for the items. Evan said yes. He asked for the receipt. Evan said it was in his pocket and started to reach for it. Haskell immediately told him not to move so fast. That was the first point where the stop could still have been corrected easily. A reasonable officer would have let the boy explain, watched his hands, and verified the purchase. Haskell went the other way. He treated nervousness like guilt. He treated a normal movement toward a receipt like a threat or an excuse. Evan stopped moving and kept his hands visible. He said again that he had paid and that the receipt was in his pocket. Haskell did not slow down. He asked why Evan had been standing near the electronics section. He asked why he was alone. He asked what was in the backpack. He asked why he looked nervous. He kept stacking questions quickly, which is a common tactic when an officer wants control more than clarity. A young person gets rattled. The officer calls that evasive behavior. Then the officer uses the same pressure he created as proof that the stop was justified. Evan stayed respectful. He gave short answers. He did not raise his voice. None of that mattered because Haskell had already settled on the version he wanted. He saw a black boy, a charger, a backpack, and a possible theft call. He filled in the rest on his own. Priya Shah came out of the store when she realized police had stopped the same customer who had just checked out. She tried to explain that there was no confirmed theft. She told Haskell the purchase could be verified through the register. He cut her off and kept his attention on the boy. That decision hurt him later. He had already been offered the easiest way to verify the facts, and he rejected it. Evan again told him the receipt was in his pocket and tried to indicate where it was. Haskell grabbed his arm, turned him toward the patrol car, and told him to stop making it worse. Now other people started paying attention. A woman loading groceries stopped and pulled out her phone. A delivery driver near the coffee shop began recording as well. One of the pharmacy employees stood near the entrance and watched Priya Shah try again to explain that the purchase had likely already been made. Haskell told her to stay back. The pattern was clear by then. Every fact that could have ended the stop was treated like interference. Evan did not resist. He did not pull away. He did not yell. He said he paid for the charger and asked to call his father. Haskell treated that request like defiance. He took control of the backpack and searched it himself. Inside were school papers, a notebook, a pencil case, and gym clothes. There was nothing stolen inside. There was nothing hidden inside. There was no support for the theft claim at all. A competent officer would have ended it there. Haskell shifted to a different justification. He started talking about suspicious behavior and concealment. Officers do that when the original reason for the stop falls apart and they still want to hold the scene. The problem for him was that the facts had already become too clean. A paid purchase, a receipt available, a manager trying to verify the transaction, and an empty backpack as far as stolen goods were concerned. He had nothing solid left. Priya Shah came back out with the transaction record. She had the timestamp and item list. She stated directly that the charger, drink, and gum had been paid for. Haskell still did not release the boy. That was the worst part of the stop. A single bad suspicion can sometimes be explained. Continuing after the evidence clears, the person is where the stop starts looking deliberate. He had been corrected by the store manager, by the purchase record, and by the search results. He still kept a child pinned to a patrol car in public. Then he asked for the boy's full name. Evan gave it. Haskell asked for the father's name. Evan told him Daniel Mercer. Haskell did not take that seriously. He acted like the boy was trying to scare him off with an important name. He called the name into dispatch while keeping Evan in place. Dispatch asked him to repeat it. He repeated it. A few seconds later, they asked him to repeat it again, slower this time. That changed the tone of the stop. Haskell did not understand the full problem yet, but he felt it. The radio lost its casual rhythm. Dispatch became careful. The supervisor's attention came quickly after that. Sergeant Lena Ortiz called him directly and asked whether he had confirmed stolen property. He had not. She asked whether the store manager verified payment. He admitted that she had said the items were paid for. She asked whether the juvenile's parent had been contacted. He said no. She asked whether this boy was being physically detained. His answer was incomplete, which told her enough. Ortiz said she was on her way. By then, the parking lot had gone quiet. The bystanders kept recording. Priya Shah stopped arguing and started watching closely. Evan stayed controlled, but he looked shaken. Haskell still tried to hold the posture of a man in charge, but it was beginning to crack. Dispatch came back once more and told him to hold the scene for a supervisor. That was when the name finally landed with him. Daniel Mercer was not just a random parent. He was the incoming Metropolitan Police Chief. He was the man the department had been talking about for weeks. He was the man who would soon have authority over discipline, command decisions, and internal review. And Officer Ryan Haskell had his 13-year-old son pressed against a patrol car over a theft that had already been disproved. Haskell looked at Evan again. Same school hoodie, same backpack, same pharmacy bag. Nothing about the boy had changed. Only the officer's understanding had changed. And by then, it was far too late. Sergeant Lena Ortiz arrived within minutes. She stepped out and looked at Evan Mercer against the patrol car, looked at the store manager holding the transaction record, and understood the situation fast. Officer Haskell had started with a weak theft suspicion and turned it into a physical detention of a child after the evidence had already moved against him. She asked him one direct question. She wanted to know whether he had confirmed any stolen property. He had not. She asked Priya Shah whether the items had been paid for. Shah told her they had. She showed her the register record with the time, the item list, and the payment. Ortiz then asked whether Evan had been allowed to call a parent. He had not. She asked whether Haskell had searched the backpack. He had. She asked whether that search found stolen property. It had not. That was enough. She told Haskell to step away from the boy. He started explaining himself before he moved. That made him look worse. He was still trying to control the story when a supervisor had already taken control of the scene. Ortiz repeated the order. This time he stepped back. She turned to Evan and asked whether he was injured. He said he was not injured, but he was shaken. She asked him for a short account of what happened. He gave it in order. He said he paid inside. He said he tried to show the receipt. He said the officer grabbed him before he could take it out. He said he asked to call his father and was not allowed. That was a clean statement. It matched the manager's account and the basic timeline already forming around the stop. Ortiz then told Evan he could call his father. Daniel Mercer answered immediately. Evan told him he had been stopped outside the pharmacy over something he paid for. He told him a supervisor was there now. Mercer asked whether he was safe at that moment. Evan said yes. Mercer said he was coming. That was when Haskell understood he no longer had room to fix this in the field. Up to that point, he was still operating on instinct. He was still hoping procedure and tone would cover the weakness of the stop. Once the father was on the way and the supervisor had already heard the basics, the situation changed. This was no longer about whether he could keep control of a child in a parking lot. It was about whether his report could survive contact with body camera footage, store records, witness video, and command review. He tried to improve his position. He told Ortiz the juvenile had acted nervously. He said the movement toward the pocket raised concerns. He said he was investigating possible concealment. He said the totality of the circumstances justified the stop. None of it helped. Every explanation came after the key facts. The purchase had been verified. The backpack had nothing in it. The child had asked to show a receipt and was blocked from doing it. The store manager had tried to correct him more than once. Those details did not leave much room for creative reporting. A black SUV pulled into the lot a few minutes later. Daniel Mercer stepped out and walked straight to his son. He did not stop at Haskell first. He did not make a scene. He checked Evan's arms, face, and posture. He asked whether Haskell had handcuffed him. Evan said no, but he said the officer grabbed him and held him against the car. Mercer asked whether he had been allowed to show the receipt. Evan said no. He asked whether the store had confirmed payment. Evan said the manager tried to tell the officer that. Mercer then turned to Ortiz and asked whether his son was free to leave. Ortiz said yes. He asked whether the department had any evidence of theft. Ortiz said no. That answer settled the public part of the scene. Evan was no longer being detained. The problem for Haskell was that the stop did not end when the detention ended. It moved into a more dangerous stage. Mercer asked Shaw whether the store would preserve all footage and the transaction record. She said yes. He looked toward the bystanders recording and understood immediately that the stop had already left the control of the officer who started it. There were now multiple records of the same event. That usually decides these cases before the paperwork even begins. Then Mercer addressed Haskell. He did not threaten him. He did not raise his voice. He asked narrow questions in a calm tone. He asked when the officer first had probable cause for a theft detention. He asked what specific stolen item had been identified. He asked why the stop continued after the manager confirmed payment. He asked why a juvenile had been denied immediate parent contact while being physically controlled in public. Haskell tried answering, but the sequence hurt him. A bad stop can sound forceful in real time. It sounds very different when someone breaks it into steps and asks what fact justified each step. He had no good answer for the moment he grabbed the boy. He had no good answer for the bag search after the boy said the receipt was in his pocket. He had no good answer for continuing the detention after the transaction was verified. Mercer did not drag it out. He told Ortiz that every recording tied to the stop needed preservation orders immediately. He included body camera footage, vehicle camera footage, store surveillance, dispatch traffic, and the incident call record. He told her the watch commander needed notice before the end of the hour. He also told her internal affairs had to be informed that same evening. Haskell stood there and watched the stop turn into evidence management around him. That was the real turn. He had started the encounter, assuming the badge on his chest gave him the final word. Now his own chain of command was moving to secure the record before he could shape it. Mercer took Evan to the SUV, but he did not leave immediately. He stayed long enough to make one point very clear. He told Ortiz that the case should not be treated differently because his son was involved. It should be treated exactly the way any case should be treated. When an officer detained a minor without confirming the offense, ignored proof of purchase, and kept escalating after being corrected. That point traveled through the department fast. It mattered because officers often expect quiet protection when they embarrass the agency. Mercer cut that off before it started. He was not offering a private resolution. He was telling the department to follow the facts all the way through. By the end of the shift, Haskell had to submit a formal statement. The first review went badly for him. Body camera footage showed Evan staying respectful. It showed him trying to explain the receipt. It showed Priya Shah attempting to verify the purchase. It showed the backpack search producing nothing. It showed Haskell keep physical control after the stop had already lost its basis. The dispatch log hurt him too. It showed when the father's name was run. It showed how the tone changed once the identity became clear. It showed the supervisor arriving before the officer corrected anything on his own. That last part mattered a lot. He could not claim he quickly fixed an honest mistake. The footage showed the opposite. He stayed committed until supervision forced the stop to reverse. Late that night, Haskell got a call from the watch commander telling him he was being placed on administrative leave pending formal review. That is where officers start realizing whether a department is about to protect them or cut them loose. He tried calling people he thought might soften it. A former supervisor, a union contact, another officer who owed him favors. He kept using the same defense. He said it was a retail theft investigation that got politically sensitive because of the family name. That argument sounded better in his head than it did on paper. The family name did not create the misconduct. It just removed his ability to bury it. By the next morning, senior command had reviewed the basic facts. The case was already bigger than one parking lot stop. The first question inside the department was no longer whether Haskell handled one child badly. The first question was how many other stops like this existed in his history that nobody had pulled apart because the family at the center did not have power. That question was dangerous for him. Because once a department starts asking it, they do not stop at one report. Once the department opened Officer Haskell's record, the stop in the pharmacy lot stopped looking like one bad decision and started looking like a pattern. Internal Affairs pulled his body camera history, complaint file, stop reports, and use of force reviews. They focused on retail stops, juvenile contacts, and encounters that started with weak suspicion and ended with physical control. That review moved fast because the incoming chief's son was involved, but the findings did not depend on that fact. The findings depended on paperwork, footage, and numbers. Haskell had more than one prior complaint for rough treatment during low-level stops. Most had gone nowhere. A few had been closed as not sustained because there was no clear video, no independent witness, or no supervisor willing to push it further. On paper, that gave him cover. Under a full review, it gave investigators a trail. They found repeated problems. He escalated quickly. He stretched vague suspicion into prolonged detentions. He used words like evasive, furtive, and uncooperative in reports, where the footage showed fear more than resistance. He often framed ordinary movement as a threat once he needed a reason to justify getting physical. It was the same method again and again. Decide first, build the language later. That review changed the case. Now, the issue is not only what he did to Evan Mercer. The issue is whether supervisors had been ignoring warning signs because the people on the receiving end had less power, less money, and less access. Daniel Mercer understood that immediately. He did not treat the case as a private family matter. He did not want a quiet apology and a transfer. He pushed for a full administrative review and made it clear that the department would either examine the pattern honestly or admit it had been protecting bad street work. That made people nervous all over headquarters. By the end of the week, Haskell was still on an administrative leave. His badge and weapon had been surrendered, and his union representative was involved in every formal interview. He tried the same defense one more time. He said he responded to a possible shoplifting call, encountered a nervous juvenile, and acted in good faith under uncertain conditions. That defense collapsed when investigators laid out the timeline. First, there was no confirmed theft before he stopped Evan. Second, Evan told him he had a receipt. Third, the store manager attempted to verify the purchase almost immediately. Fourth, the backpack search found no stolen property. Fifth, Haskell still continued the detention. Sixth, he denied or delayed parent contact for a minor while physically controlling him in public. Seventh, he only lost momentum when dispatch verified the father's name and a supervisor arrived. That sequence was devastating because it stripped away every excuse. An honest mistake should get weaker as the facts come in and then stop. Haskell did the opposite. He got corrected and pushed harder. The case then moved outside the department. Mercer hired outside counsel for his son. That was another bad sign for the city. Once experienced civil rights lawyers reviewed the footage, they saw the same thing Internal Affairs had already seen. Weak cause, unnecessary physical detention, a minor. Clear exculpatory evidence ignored in real time, public humiliation, a strong argument for selective enforcement and profiling. The city law department knew what that meant. This was no longer a case they could defend cheaply. The footage also leaked. It did not take long. One bystander video reached local media first. Then body camera details started appearing in reporting. The public reaction was immediate because the facts were simple enough for anyone to follow. A child bought a charger, a drink, and gum. A patrolman stopped him, refused to check the receipt properly, grabbed him, searched his bag, ignored the store manager, and kept going until he learned who the father was. The worst part for the department was obvious. People started asking the same question everywhere. If that boy had not been the chief's son, would anything have happened to the officer at all? The department had no good answer to that. Community groups picked up the case. So did defense attorneys who had seen Haskell's name before. A few former complainants came forward after seeing the news. One man said Haskell had detained him outside a convenience store the year before on almost the same theory. Another family said their teenage nephew had been searched during a bicycle stop with no citation and no follow-up. Separately, those complaints had gone nowhere. Together, they started to look like a map. The city moved toward damage control. Haskell was called into a final disciplinary conference. He attended with union representation. Investigators laid out policy violations tied to unlawful detention, failure to de-escalate, improper juvenile handling, inaccurate or misleading reporting language, and conduct unbecoming. He tried to defend the stop as a split-second field judgment. That argument was weak because the footage showed multiple chances to stop and multiple choices to continue. The department terminated him. That alone would have been serious, but it did not stop there. The state certification board received the case file for decertification review. That put his future in law enforcement at risk beyond one department. Once that process started, his career was effectively over. Even before the board finished, no serious agency was going to touch an officer whose misconduct file now included a high-profile juvenile detention, public video, and a pattern review that exposed repeated problems. The civil case ended the way cases like this usually end when the facts are bad enough. The city settled. The settlement was large, and it came with more than money. Evan Mercer's legal team pushed for formal policy changes, recorded training requirements, and an independent audit of juvenile stop procedures. The city agreed to a package that included financial compensation for Evan, mandatory retraining on retail theft investigations, revised juvenile contact rules, stricter evidence preservation requirements, and an early warning review system for officers with repeated complaint patterns. That part mattered more than the headline number. A settlement closes one case. Policy changes admit the case revealed something real. Daniel Mercer used the incident in his first months as chief to force changes inside the department. Officers could no longer stretch a vague, suspicious person call into a full detention without documented cause. Juvenile stops required faster guardian notification. Supervisors had to review body camera footage in any public detention of a minor involving no arrest. Language and reports got more scrutiny, especially the usual vague terms officers use to hide weak facts. Mercer also reopened review standards for repeated low-level complaints that had been ignored because each one looked small on its own. That made enemies for him inside the department, but he did not care. He had seen what happened when a child did everything right and still got treated like a suspect because one patrolman trusted his own assumptions more than facts. Evan recovered, but the stop stayed with him. Not because he had been injured badly, because he learned early what a uniform can do when the wrong person wears it. He also learned something else. Records matter, witnesses matter, procedure matters, calm matters. The truth does not always win in the moment, but it gets stronger when the evidence holds. Officer Haskell thought he was dealing with one nervous kid outside a pharmacy. He was really exposing the way he worked in front of cameras, witnesses, supervisors, lawyers, the city, and the next chief of police. That was the mistake. Not just grabbing the wrong boy. Showing the whole system exactly what he had probably been doing to people who could not fight back. That is why his career collapsed so fast once the review started. The stop was bad. The record behind it was worse. If you have seen a stop like this in real life, say what stood out to you. If you were standing in that parking lot, what would you have done? And if you want more stories like this, subscribe.